Hello, everybody. It's Jonathan Miller from brokenStones here again for another brokenStones business podcast. Today, joining me is Steven Nock from Harris Balcombe. Welcome on board.
Hello. Hello.
With regard to these podcasts, obviously, for those of you who've tuned in already, we are obviously a Lichfield-based business, and we're very passionate about working and talking to other businesses in the area. The nature of these podcasts is for these businesses to talk about themselves, talk about their business backgrounds, their experiences, give some advice for businesses either setting up or developing, and generally, a 20-25 minute talk about shop. So Steven, if you want to introduce yourself to the listeners, and we'll go from there.
Happily. Thank you for that. So my name is Steven Nock, and I'm a partner at Harris Balcombe LLP, which has 3 offices across the country: in London, the Midlands, which is Lichfield, and in Manchester. And we help clients who've suffered some form of loss, most normally fire, theft, flood. Could be something else though, could be financial risk, could be cyber. And we help them measure their loss, quantify it and present it normally to insurers, but it could be to third parties. So, and that's across the whole range from domestic claims where you may have a small fire or leak or whatever, right the way through to commercial claims for FTSE 100 businesses. Cool.
Now, obviously, you guys are neighbours of ours in Lichfield. We bump into each other, or until recently, we've bumped into each other fairly regularly. Why Lichfield?
Well, honestly, because it's close to my heart. But essentially, we needed a Midlands base. There's quite a lot of industry and what have you in this area, and it would be remiss not to have local coverage.
No, very good. I mean, we, as a business, obviously, we've been in Lichfield for about 14 or 15 years now. We see a really strong sector for professional services business, and I know that's a very broad stroke, but legal businesses, accountancy business, insurance businesses, HR businesses, that sort of stuff, and obviously your own industry. There seems to be a strong sector in this area. Would you agree?
I think that's right, and obviously helped by good communication links, both in terms of road, but also in terms of, for me, ability to get to London. Not so much over the last 18 months, but before that was very important. No,
I mean, it looks like you're working from home at the moment today. I mean, maybe just give the listeners a brief overview of how the pandemic has affected your business, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of how you've been agile enough to adapt to the current situation.
Okay, so I suppose, like many businesses, we were enjoying a reasonably healthy start to 2020. It was all looking good, and then it felt a little bit like the rug was pulled from beneath us. And for some businesses, of course, that's definitely true and has continued to be the case. For us, I suppose we were fortunate to have a body of work in our routine sort of caseload of fires and thefts and floods. But also very quickly identified a need for a number of businesses who may have cover for their COVID-19 losses. So a small proportion of business interruption policies provide cover for the impact of disease. And so we were able to sort of turn our BI expertise in that direction and win a lot of clients. Almost lead the way, I would say, in terms of negotiating on behalf of those clients for those claims. So that has occupied a large part of the last 18 months and continues to do so.
So how would clients get to hear about you guys? I guess to come in and get that help. I mean, obviously you and I had a brief chat about it in the car park about 16 months ago, and you very kindly offered to look at our insurance policy, which we are grateful for. So thank you for that.
That's a pleasure. We have had some press coverage in the Sunday Times and other periodicals and press articles. A simple Google search of COVID and insurance would probably put us up there in the on page 1 because of our prevalence and because there aren't that many people who specialize in what we do. But this has probably been the year where insurance has been more in the headlines than ever before. And before we came on, you mentioned that insurance is quite dry, and clearly it is. And often the devil's in the detail. But when businesses are facing, a very difficult time, if there's any hope at all of getting them additional resource to cope with that, then I think it's worth exploring.
Because that's a great point. Obviously, as a business, we have tried to take advantage of anything we can in the current situation, whether it be funding or whether it be government help. And obviously, we put in an insurance claim for business continuity interruption as well. I'm hoping I'm getting the wording right there. As you can tell, I don't deal with the insurances. But as you said, the devil is in the detail. And I guess when you have insurance documents in front of you, these are big beasts of a document, aren't they?
They absolutely are. And what we found, a number of clients have come to us many months after the initial sort of lockdown and the initial review. And many of those will have presented a claim or an indication that they intended to claim to their insurers and been told very early on that that was not the intention of the policy and there was no cover. And unfortunately, some of those will have listened to that, assuming that it was correct, and moved on and survived or not survived on their own, under their own steam. In sort of May, the FCA launched a test case, which we and others fed into, and that has actually resulted in a decision in January, which said that in some cases those insurer statements were wrong. And so what I would say to any listeners is that you should either revisit that decision that was communicated to you early on, or happily, if you want to get in touch with me or my firm, we would look at those policies for you. It's probably easier for us to look than it is for a regular businessman to look at it and understand the nuances of the policy. But certainly in the early days, some of those decisions were flawed.
I mean, this is a crucial. It's a really interesting and crucial point you've brought up here, I guess, because I guess claims are going to be ongoing and still ongoing, and there will be future claims, and people will be looking back at decisions made on insurance claims. So, I mean, while I'm not obviously looking to do your sales and marketing for you, how can we help, and how can generally this sort of information get out there now? I know you have a website, I know there's Google searches, but what are you looking for then?
I mean, we have had, we've put coverage on LinkedIn and what have you. Honestly, we are very happy as a firm to receive policy schedules and wordings and to review them for clients who think they may have cover but have been told that they haven't. Because I think where that cover exists, it's right that they should be able to make a valid claim, and it's entirely wrong for that early decision, if it was communicated as not covered, to stand. That's the very basis of insurance, isn't it? That it should pay out at the moment of need. Absolutely,
I agree, and certainly when we get this podcast out to the public, I think we'll be making a huge point of this, I think, and this is the way to lead with it. In terms of the business itself and how it's operated, I presume when March, whenever it was, came in, you scattered to the four winds. Did you?
We did, yeah. I mean, we are not a sort of typical business in the sense that although we have an office presence and we've always thought of that as quite important, often many of our people will be out on site anyway, meeting clients. In the sense of a fire claim that's damaged a building, our surveyors will be out on site a lot, looking at the progress of those building reinstatement works and what have you. So we were never confined to base, but obviously in March 2020, as you say, we all scattered back home. And as a business, that left us with, like many businesses, the need to very rapidly provide adequate and secure facilities for people to work from home. One of the short-term problems, I think, in March was that everyone was doing that, and it's sort of unprecedented that everyone was going out looking for additional IT equipment and what have you. And I know my laptop broke in that week, and getting the same spec replacement was actually quite difficult.
It's a challenge we're facing as a supplier. I mean, just for the benefit of the listeners, we don't actually support you guys, and in terms of IT, we have a print solution in place with Harris Balcombe, which is still working very well. But across the technology sector, getting hold of kit, whatever that happens to be, and anything with components in it is incredibly difficult at present, and it's one of our challenges at the moment, is managing people's expectations in terms of lead times and delivery, and even getting, like you said, a match for what you previously had, it's incredibly difficult. Obviously, the Suez Canal put a bit of a dent in all that as well.
It's almost a perfect storm, isn't it? With Brexit, COVID, lockdowns, the whole issue with rare metals and what have you, and then the Suez Canal. If you wanted to create a scenario where there were difficulties in supply, you couldn't do much better than that, really.
No, this was a good test. I can't deny that. It's a good test. In terms of looking after your staff, then, I mean, obviously you have a good number of employees, and I know you had a team working for yourself in Lichfield. What are the challenges you faced as a manager and a director of the business in terms of keeping people efficient and happy staff means a happy business? What are the challenges you faced?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big challenge for us was moving from some home working and some on-site working, and with some office working, where people tended to come back and consolidate and catch up with colleagues and what have you, do volume printing if it was necessary, as we've alluded to. Going from that to purely working from home for an extended period and not having that day-to-day contact with other humans, which sounds a bit strange, but I think that was an issue, and we've dealt with it in a variety of ways. But I have to say, prior to March 20, and perhaps a reflection of my lack of technical knowledge, I hadn't even heard of Zoom. Mm-hmm. And now it's a daily feature, along with Teams and various other facilities like that.
Yeah, I have a client who will remain nameless for now, but she calls it the Zoom of doom. Yes. She finds herself getting drawn into it, and will look up and suddenly it's 5:45 and the day has gone through Zoom meetings again. But on a personal level, I now work from home probably 4 days a week. Taylor and I try to get together one day of the week to talk about marketing and business and that sort of thing. But I'm loving the lack of commute all of a sudden. I've got to be honest with you. The days that I do commute in, it drives me insane if there's a 30 or 40 minute wait. You know, it absolutely. Yeah,
I think it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I used to go to London at least once a week, probably twice, because insurance is very London city centric. And obviously, well, the city emptied, and there are all these vast offices of insurers and large brokers with thousands of desks empty. And we've all survived, and life has carried on. And I guess there's quite an important message there. Probably some balance between home and office is the optimum, but it's not nearly as important as many people thought it was.
Yeah, it is fascinating. We had a conversation earlier on with the business, and they seem to be very forward thinking. A firm of solicitors, and they're talking about when people are working from home, they obviously charge themselves out by the hour, as you'd expect. But you know, in terms of encouraging people to go for a walk or a bike ride, or you know, and if they decide to have a couple of hours off during the day, but then work in the evening, then that's fine. It's that ability to be agile, the ability to adapt, and they're the companies who have future-proofed what they're doing. They're the people who are doing well now. I think the people who have embraced. It's a funny phrase to say, embraced the pandemic, but there are companies who have done well. We've done well out of it as a business. You know, IT has been in demand, as you'd expect. But I guess that's what I was leading forward to is again, as a business, you do sound like you're future-proofing what you're trying to do and put processes in place where if something like this happens again, life continues as normal.
Yeah, I think so. I think we like many others would be much better equipped to transition immediately rather than over days and weeks. And I think, you know, we'd already started a staff welfare scheme and that sort of thing. So that has helped, I suppose, in terms of there's definitely an ethos of looking after people here, much like the business tries to with clients. It also tries to with staff, and that is paid back.
Very good. You mentioned something which made me prick up my ears earlier on. You said you also dealt with companies who'd experienced a cyber breach and a cyber attack. I mean, I guess that's something that you're seeing more and more as time goes on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the news. Our own experience is that those sorts of attacks have increased over the last 18 months. I think it's inevitable as more and more business is conducted online. And and that is a feature of what we do, and probably an area where there's some overlap potentially between your business and mine. So we are focused entirely on the insurance response and quantifying the losses, helping to minimize the impact of that on the business on an ongoing basis, and then recovering whatever compensation may be available from their insurers, whereas you would be more front end, I suppose, and immediately post loss.
It's an interesting one, actually, because obviously we do talk a lot about cyber security. It's one of the pillars of what we do, and Chris, who is the business owner, is very passionate about it, and is a cyber essentials assessor and there's various qualifications. One of the first questions we ask when people come to us and say, can we have a cyber security conversation, is, do you have cyber insurance? It's literally the first thing we ask. There is no point getting into the nitty gritty of what antivirus they're using, if at all, what firewalls have in place, what processes they have in place, do they have a disaster recovery plan in place? Literally the first thing we say is, do you have cyber insurance? If they say yes, we say brilliant. If they say no, we say, well, can we please talk about when you're going to get it, and then we'll move on from there. But there is definitely overlap within the business, and we saw some horrible stats in the first couple of months of lockdown and pandemic. The number of attacks, the number of phishing attacks, the number of brute force attacks, especially on small to medium-sized businesses who have suddenly gone from the relative security of an office to working from home on non-supported devices, on using Wi-Fi in McDonald's and places like that, whatever it happens to be, and people are the weak link when it comes to security, and people will be taken away from that umbrella of safety. And the first few months were scary for many businesses. So definite overlap within the business, and certainly another conversation we could have. But it's the advice I would always give to anyone. At the start of the cybersecurity conversation, get yourself some insurance. I believe, you may correct me if I'm wrong here, in the States, you have to have cyber insurance as a business. I'm pretty sure it's mandatory.
Okay, I don't know. Could be.
And it should be.
It's
here.
not a bad idea. It should be. I suppose following on from that and just expanding upon it a little bit, the number one problem with insurance is that it's often considered to be generic. So people talk about having purchased insurance. They talk about needing to get insurance. And then when they've done it, it's like a tick box and it's done. What I would say from my 20 odd years of dealing with claims, both for insurers and now for claimants, is that insurance most definitely is not generic. And so it is worth spending a little bit of time looking at what cover it offers you, what types of claims it responds to, whether there are any conditions precedent, which means that if you haven't complied with those, the claim won't be paid. And very often, the first time people look at that type of detail, whether it's cyber or any other insurance, is at the point they've suffered a loss, at which point it's too late. So, in a proportion of our cases, we are sort of trying to dig the client out of a hole that's been fallen into because they hadn't read that detail and they weren't aware of it, and perhaps the broker hadn't highlighted it to them.
So I'm guessing there is a huge education piece to be put out here as well somehow. I'm trying to think how we can do it, and obviously you guys have those plans in place, but I'm wondering if there's anything we can help you with our clients to get that education piece out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, what we've done it with other sort of professional services businesses and other larger businesses is sort of do a separate webinar or seminar on the subject of business interruption insurance, which includes cyber, and just talked about the common pitfalls, just try to make businesses aware of what they should and shouldn't do, and try and avoid some of those obvious mistakes that are very easy to make, and hope that if and when they have a loss, they will remember the advice given free of charge and come back to us for the claim. But there are a lot of people out there who consider insurance to be generic, and that's the first mistake.
Well, I think this is something certainly you and I can explore, and we can perhaps look at a future piece based around that. Just very quickly then, because I appreciate time is pushing on. Obviously, career-wise, you've been with the business for a decent number of years now. It seems a bit crass to say, how did you get into it? Are you a lifelong insurance guy, or where did you start?
No, I started as a graduate trainee for a national firm of accountants, qualified as a chartered accountant. Honestly, found that a little bit dull. Was looking for some way of making day-to-day work more exciting. stumbled upon a loss adjusting business who worked for Insurers. Found that whole interview process quite interesting and jumped ship. Stayed with them, and then basically never really looked back. So from then on, I became more insurance minded, but with the benefit of the accountancy background.
Is there anything career-wise you could perhaps, or business-wise, and developing an office-wise, could you give a couple of sound bites to people? Some good experiences you've been through and some advice you could give?
So in terms of experiences, I suppose the size of the physical loss, if we're talking about damage, so it doesn't necessarily correspond to the impact it can have on the business. And the best example of that was a business that distributed goods to a national retailer, where they had a small fire in some IT equipment, which was key to them being able to pick goods from their warehouse. So it was all computer controlled. They lost this control system, which meant they had no clue where goods were stored in this vast warehouse. And on one day in October, as they ran into the Christmas lead up, they were due to distribute 10% of their annual turnover's worth of goods, and they couldn't do it.
Wow.
So there's a lesson there, I suppose. And then moving on in terms of other advice, one that's linked with your business is that very often businesses do take backups. In my experience, when I'm called to help or look at a claim flowing from an incident, we look at the backup and it's failed for some reason, but they didn't know. So a piece of advice I would give to our mutual clients and listeners is do test the backup. Periodically, they should be checking that the backup works and fulfills whatever criteria they need it to fulfill.
It's fascinating, how similar the conversations you and I have with our clients, by the sound of it. Backups are traditionally done badly. They're not tested. People won't test their disaster recovery procedures on an annual basis. There are still scarily people using hard drives and removable hard drives for their backups on their critical data. And one of the first things that a cyber criminal will do is attack your backups. It's as simple as that. So when you turn around and say, well, we'll just restore everything, try and restore it, and it's not there. It's a conversation we have again and again and again. There are some great, this is leading on to my final point actually about business continuity, because that's in essence, that's the majority of conversations we have as IT managed services providers. Now we're not talking about RAM and size of screens and processors. That comes as part of the job. What we're talking about now is business continuity. How long can you be without your businesses? How long can you be without your processes for? How long can you be without your data for? What's the reputational damage if you have a cyber attack or a breakdown or something like that? And that's really key. We look at business outcomes. We're looking at profitability, we're looking at financial clarity, happy staff, all security, all that sort of stuff, and try and get away from the real geekiness of IT. And it's very much yourselves, I guess. It's that business continuity conversation which is key. So I buy in very, very closely to what you're saying. It's really interesting that
the overlap's quite interesting, isn't it? I mean,
it is. We need another conversation, I think, away from here. For the listeners will be thinking there's some sort of loving going on here. But listen, I want to finish up now, if that's okay. And this has been really useful. I think we're going to work with you guys to get that message out to the business community about people who have made the claims and perhaps have had those claims rejected for both in COVID and other areas as well. Because like I say, you guys very generously helped us and you didn't have to, and that was brilliant. And we do appreciate that. So have you got anything else to finish up with, I guess, and then we'll say goodbye to the listeners?
I suppose one final piece of advice for any businesses that don't want to specifically get in touch is that they should also check the cover that they've got on their general insurance, and not just cyber, but in terms of, and don't underestimate how long it takes to recover from a serious incident. So it's not just the time necessary to rebuild the building or to move into other rented premises. It's also the impact of letting down your biggest customer or upsetting a client to the extent that you lose their contract and they don't come back for 5 years or ever. And it's those sort of things that often get overlooked.
I think that's brilliant advice. I think a crystal ball would be great.
Yeah.
But if you can future-proof yourself in all forms of your business, then that's a great place to start. So, Stephen, that's been magnificent. Thank you for today. I've really enjoyed it. We've obviously got a lot more to talk about following this, but I think for the listeners, please do get in touch with Stephen when we share this podcast out. We'll put your contact details in and some LinkedIn links and phone numbers and that sort of stuff. So, I'm really hope people get in touch. And hopefully, you won't hear too many horror stories, but these guys are here to help. So thank you, everyone.
Excellent.
It's
Thank
been
you
great.
very much.
We'll finish it there.
Thank you.